The reason why the Jamaican government should spend 10% of the UK £5 billion loan on an airport in or near Black River is because the government has declared that it intended to double the tourism industry by adding another 4 million visitors each year to Jamaica. The extra 4 million visitors should be dispersed to the four corners of Jamaica, spreading the tourism industry equitably across Jamaica. For example, 1 million visitors each in St. Elizabeth, Westmoreland, St. Thomas, and Portland. This is why we need an airport in or near Black River. It takes 1 hour's drive to get from the St. Elizabeth border at Whitehouse to Junction and Alligator Pond, the other border of St. Elizabeth. Then it will take another 35 to 45 minutes to get to the new airport near Negril. The PM said that he needs all Jamaica to be within 1 hour's drive from an international airport. Hence, if it takes almost 1 hour's drive from one end of St. Elizabeth boundary to the other end of St. Elizabeth along the tourist route, which is the seacoast, then St. Elizabeth definitely needs an international airport. Singapore is just over half the size of St. Elizabeth, and they have 2 civilian airports plus another 9 military airports. This is why they have 20 million visitors each year, despite being smaller than St. Elizabeth. Hence, having an airport in St. Elizabeth to boost the tourism industry makes much economical sense. MBJ Airport was crumbling under the pressure of having 3 million visitors each year. Hence, no airport in Jamaica needs to reach 3 million visitors again, except maybe Norman Manley International Airport. That airport is in the middle of nowhere, with lots of lands around it, with scope for massive developments. Westmoreland and Hanover, which both share the Negril 7-mile beach, will have 2 million visitors soon. Or by the time the Negril airport is open, 2 million visitors will be enough for the Negril airport. We need another 1 to 2 million visitors for St. Elizabeth and Manchester. Hence, we need an airport in St. Elizabeth to accommodate these visitors. There is only about a quarter of Jamaica that modern-day tourists know about. I said modern-day tourists because back in the 60s and 70s, when it was mainly middle-class tourists traveling, they used to hire a car and drive around the country. That was before the crime situation deteriorated in Jamaica, especially before the 1980 general election violence. As a child in the late 60s and throughout the 70s, I used to see tourists just drive up in St. Elizabeth, park their car and go for a swim for a couple of hours, then drove off and go to another local attraction or restaurant and so on. This was common in St. Elizabeth, where I'm from, and other localities around the country. Now very few tourists go to St. Elizabeth on adventures anymore. Hence, we need the mega-large, all-inclusive hotels to create jobs for our local people in the southwest parishes of Jamaica. This is what the airport is for, to bring in the mega-large hotels investors. Jamaica has lots of scope for tourism developments because Jamaica has 3 times fewer tourists each year than most other Caribbean countries on average. According to Jamaica's population size, we would need to add another 10 million visitors to equal some Caribbean countries' visitor numbers per capita. Jamaica is also 3 times poorer than most other Caribbean countries per capita, apart from Haiti. In fact, Jamaica is nearer to Haiti's GDP per capita ratio than they are to almost all other Caribbean countries. This is why the Jamaican government needs to take the tourism product seriously by matching other Caribbean countries' visitor numbers per capita. Hence, Jamaica can triple its tourism numbers from 4.3 million to 13 million visitors each year, and still have fewer visitors per capita than many other Caribbean countries. The per capita visitor numbers comparison is the most important measure because it determines the percentage of the population that is employed in the tourism industry. Jamaica needs to triple its tourism industry to provide jobs for its youths. This is what can dramatically bring the crime rates down in Jamaica. All new mega-large hotels need to be built in rural parishes to provide jobs for the youths. Jamaica should not be dispersing people across the country to work in the hotels. Instead, bring the tourists to where the people need those hotel jobs. The breaking up of families for menial work is a legacy that we have inherited from slavery, and it needs to stop now. Jamaica needs healing, and it started within the family. Let's keep the families together so that they can be healed. I will address the jacket issues in Jamaica and how the situation is made worse when one partner has to find work away from their community, etc. What Jamaica needs now is 100 to 200 mega-large hotels to provide jobs for 300,000 of our underclass population. Then we need to build 300,000 affordable houses for them, which they will pay for from their permanent full-time employment in the tourism industry. This should be a 10-year project, with 30,000 houses being built each year, starting immediately. Studies from all over the world have shown that young men who have a house and a young family to take care of are far less likely to fall into crimes than those who are single and do not have that responsibility of looking after a family. Unskilled young men need to know that they have a stake in Jamaica and that they have great opportunities before them in Jamaica. By the time the 120 new mega hotels are finished building, minimum wage should be doubled to $200 per week. This will allow every hotel worker in Jamaica to pay for their houses. Minimum wage has risen by over 30% per year over the past 3 years. It only needs to rise by half that rate of increase over the next 5 to 6 years to double again. The hotels will be built by foreigners. Hence, Jamaica will not need to borrow any money to build the hotels needed. It is the money that the government raises from the hotels that will build out Jamaica's infrastructures. Whatever infrastructure is needed for the hotels to function, the Jamaican people need the same thing as well. Hence, the government needs to invest in water, roads, electricity, and health centers in St. Elizabeth, both for the locals and for the visitors alike. I agree with many of my critics that the land should be leased to the FDIs, not sold as freehold. When I used to hear about the government giving out franchises, I thought it was a 50 or 99 years lease. I think that the maximum lease should be 99 years, then the hotels become Jamaica-owned or the lease extended to the hoteliers, etc. However, Jamaica would need to match what other Caribbean countries are offering, or the hoteliers may not invest in Jamaica. Some of my critics are saying that people do not want to do hotel jobs in Jamaica. The reason why some hotels can't get staff is because the government is allowing all the hotels to be built in one location, especially in Montego Bay. I've been saying this since the very start of my YouTube posts 2 years ago. If the government keeps allowing all the new mega hotels to be built in just a few locations, then there will be staff shortages in those areas, where all the hotels are being built. This is why I'm championing the cause for an airport to be built in St. Elizabeth. Montego Bay does not need any more mega-large all-inclusive hotels, but that is where most of the large hotels are still being built today. Bring 1 to 2 million of the new visitors to St. Elizabeth, where people will be queuing up for those hotel jobs. For every person that leaves St. Elizabeth to work in a hotel on the North Coast, there are 10 other people in St. Elizabeth who would welcome a hotel job in their parish. In terms of the wages, the government has doubled the minimum wage in the last 3 years, from 2022 to 2024, an average of over 30% increase each year. Now the government needs to double the minimum wage again over the next 5 to 6 years, at half that rate of increase than the last 3 years. Then in 5 to 6 years' time, When the 120 mega-large all-inclusive hotels should be completed, minimum wage should be doubled to $200 per week. This is if the government is serious about doubling the tourism industry to over 8 million visitors each year. The reason why our current Minister of Tourism has failed to grow the tourism industry over the past 8 years is because he is trying to move away from the Jamaican-invented luxury all-inclusive model, leaving other Caribbean countries like the Bahamas and the Dominican Republic to double their tourism industry over the past 8 years. The other Caribbean countries double their tourism industry mainly through all-inclusive hotels, the same model that Jamaica is trying to move away from. Other Caribbean countries have added millions of visitors over the past 8 years, using the Jamaica model. While Jamaica's visitor numbers have stagnated over the past 8 years, not one visitor has been added to Jamaica's overall visitor numbers over the past 8 years. It is the government that needs to ensure that tourism is spread all across Jamaica, and not just in Montego Bay and a couple other hotspots. I know when returning residents from St. Elizabeth were investing heavily in the hotel industry in the 1970s and 80s. However, with the government using taxpayers' money to develop just a few areas on the north coast, those investors in Black River and St. Elizabeth could not compete with the government. Most died without recovering their costs, it would appear. Hence, it is time for the government to rethink tourism and spread the tourism product all across Jamaica. On my YouTube homepage, it states that agriculture needs to start growing by 20% per year in Jamaica. Farming, and especially growing what we eat, is to provide stability to Jamaica. Though I mainly speak about tourism on my YouTube channel, on my homepage it states that both tourism and agriculture need to start growing by 20% per year. Tourism is to create wealth for Jamaica, while farming is to keep the wealth in Jamaica, such as keeping inflation low and the currency stable, etc. However, tourism needs to start growing by 20% per year as well. This is to provide the wealth for Jamaica. There are no rich agricultural countries in the world anymore. Though almost all rich countries have agricultural independence, most don't need to import any food if they don't want to. Neither should Jamaica, especially as it seems like war may break out soon.